first of all, congratulations for the birthday. But I am really, really delighted by the response that Pradhan has had. I think it's one thing to, for example, in the past, generally Pradhan has not responded to, local things like floods and so on and so forth. But this is not the same. This is very, 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 very different. And it's basically shaken whole society, whole human race, as it were. So not to respond in this, if you are in a position to respond, would have been unacceptable. So I am really, really delighted by the work that you guys are doing, and congratulate you for that. Going forward, it's very, very difficult. What is obvious and what is very clear is that the world is not going to be the same. India is not going to be the same. Our villages are not going to be the same. Our cities are not going to be the same. Our economy is not going to be the same. I think there is going to be huge issues that many of those people have already brought about. For example, would people want to come to cities anymore? Looking at the pictures, I felt so deeply ashamed as a citizen of this country that you had people carrying little babies on their heads, walking 800 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers. I mean, I remember my childhood days. We used to have to, our sort of school was about 20 kilometers away for intermediate, and so we used to live in a hostel and would come home for holidays, and that 20-kilometer walk, I remember still, used to be kind of such a dread. And here you are, people walking 800 kilometers, 600 kilometers, 500 kilometers, with little babies on their shoulders. And it was shameful. I mean, I couldn't sleep for several nights with the, just thinking about what's going on. These are our, these are us, these are our people. So, given that context, I'm really proud and really delighted by the work that you guys have been doing. As Vijayanandji was saying, there is likely to be a huge public investment. I don't think 7 lakh crore is going to take us anywhere. I think we need something of the order of 15 lakh crore investment over the next 3 years or so. And that is not including the investment that might be needed in industry and cities and so on and so forth. I'm talking about investment in the rural economy. I think we need to do, basically we need to create, and going forward, an economy and a society where people don't have to migrate for earning 10,000 rupees a month, such long distances, and live in inhuman conditions. 8 people living in one little cubby hole, 10 people living together. I don't think that's the kind of society and economy that we should be aspiring for. I think there is plenty that can be done, whereby the village is a place that people feel happy to live in, feel proud to live in, and it gives the basic services that are needed: minimum health and water, shelter, food, and creation and education, and so on and so forth. If the village could provide all of that to our people, why would so many people be running around and just to earn 10,000, 15,000 rupees in a month? In fact, many earn even less than that. So I think that's really what is needed in future, and that needs a huge amount of investment in the rural economy, as Satya had brought out, investment in the natural resources, invest in building forests, investing in building water bodies, improving agriculture land. There's an enormous amount of things where you can invest in the rural economy, whereby you create jobs for people in the short run, and in the longer run, you create an environment which can support a much more decent life than has been possible so far. So I hope that's something that our policymakers would be doing going forward. And I hope if that happens, Pradhan should be and could be playing a stellar role in that work. I think this is also an occasion where, if you look back at the history of the NGOs in India, you would find some remarkable ones that came out of distress, out of floods, out of droughts, and so on and so forth. Bunker Roy got his name because he used to always be, out in wells, digging wells at the time of drought. You had Gram Vikas set up because of the, first the cyclone in the Orissa coast, and then the Bangladesh war and the migrant refugees and so on. So there are a large number of NGOs that came out of the tragedies, that the natural calamities that the country went through. And what it basically did was that a lot of young people became conscious of something that they needed to do for their own nation, for their own country, for their own society. And so I think this is one of the, my expectation is that there will be lots of young people who would be questioning as to what they've been doing, and what kind of a country they're living in, and what kind of a country they would like to build. Can they do something about it? And I think Pradhan could be playing a role in channelizing those energies. I think that's something that, that very much down your lane, as it were. That's your basic purpose. So connecting with other NGOs, and also trying to get people on board. So instead of just saying that what we are doing, can Pradhan sort of also make a call to the young of the country that come and work with us, and let's change rural India, let's change India, so that we, going forward, if things of this nature happen, we would be ready and we would be able to deal with it in a much more dignified way, rather than what we have done this time. Even if we succeed this time, I think we've really, carried our dignity on our palms. It's just been such a no great marks for saving lives or whatever. We've actually done whatever we are doing at huge loss of human dignity, and that's something that should not happen going forward. And for that, the society needs to prepare itself. I think somebody was, I think Om Prakash was asking the question about community organizations and what have you, and Vijayananji talked about this idea of SHGs and Gram Panchayats and state agencies working together. I think that's that's in a way, that's the way to go forward. One of the big lessons that this has brought about, both positive and negative. Negative is that we actually didn't have anything on the ground, and positive that on their own, wherever there were panchayats, the panchayats have got together, the SHGs have got together, their federations have got together, and have tried to do things. So can we focus going forward? If number one is building rural assets, number two needs to be, maybe both can be done simultaneously, building a grassroots governance, both on the civil side, SHGs and so on and so forth, as well as the state side, panchayats and their different multiple layers of rural governance. So I think that's one of the things that Pradhan could be working on. And as Vijayanji was saying, there are a lot of lessons that have come out of it, a lot of new behaviors that have been brought in. For example, in your villages where you are working, the communities have become conscious of many poor people, many vulnerable people, and have risen to take care of them and provide for them, and whatever. Can that become part of the society going forward? Can that become part of the agenda of the SHGs or the federations and so on and so forth going forward? Similarly, on health behaviors, washing hands, diarrhea, etc. Apart from TB, which Vijayanand mentioned, you have diarrhea is partly because of poor hygiene. So can people take some lessons out of it, which become part of their. So I think there are positive things that we can take forward. As you know, uh, I read an article a week ago, I think on Good Friday, written by some Australian pastor, and he made a very interesting point, and he said, which is what Gandhiji has been saying also anyway, that he says, we will thrive only when authentic concern for people drives every aspect of society. So I think going forward, I hope that becomes the sort of motto that whether it is governance, whether it is society, civil society, all aspect, whether it is industry, business, whatever is done, the primary concern is people. That whatever we do, it's concern. The bottom line should be people. What does it do to people, for people, by people? So I think that's where I will stop. So once again, greetings for the birthday and really heartfelt congratulations for the great work that you've done spontaneously to sort of redeem ourselves as a society in small parts, in small locations, by by minimizing the burden on people. Thanks a lot.
First of all, congratulations, both for the birthday, but also for the fact that you are organized this samagam, maybe due to compulsion, but in a proper 21st century way. Let us, for a moment, even though we are living through a rather desperate phase of our lives, celebrate the fact that some innovations have happened in the last 30, 50 years, due to which we are able to sit in maybe 300 different locations and talk to each other, see each other, hear each other, and do it actually in a much more organized and systematic way than happens often in face-to-face events. And look at the amount of expense that has been saved, the organizational energy that has been saved, and the carbon credits that we've earned for not moving from one place to the other. So, and behind this, by the way, there are other innovations which are not so visible. We're all using Zoom, and of course there's a technological innovation there, but there's also a financial innovation. We are using Zoom for free. Right now it's for free even for big meetings, I believe, but normally 40-minute conversations are free. So there are huge innovations that have happened, and we must factor all those into account while trashing everything that human beings have done to bring us to the COVID crisis. There's no doubt that the COVID crisis is man-made, whether it's due to the destruction of wildlife habitats, which have led to zoonotic viruses arising, or whether it's due to the even more serious charge that one is hearing that there's a global biowarfare industry which has been working, and some of it leaked through a Chinese lab. Whatever be the truth, it is a man-made crisis, and therefore the solutions will also have to be man-made. So coming now to the specific Pradhan context, I'd like to start with what Satya mentioned, and there were some comments on the group chat. So let us, without sort of arguing about what are the numbers, but let's assume that there were 20 crore Indians who had gone from rural India to outside their villages to work, and at least 10 crores of them had gone across the states. I mean, what are the exact numbers? We will determine at some stage. And out of these 10 crores, even if, say, half, 5 crore have come back, or will come back in the next 1 or 2 months as the lockdown eases, not all of them may want to go back because of the fact that the desperateness of their situation, the benefit cost of living an undignified, uncertain life has become starkly clear to all of them. And even the poorest human being would rebel against such circumstances at deep, very nicely mentioned, that dignity is equally important and not just bread. And I think at least we've taken away dignity from crores of people. So operationally, let us take those 5 crores. Let's assume out of those 5 crores, 2 crores actually want to stay back. They don't want to go back to the cities, and 3 crores want to go back. So that gives us 2 very large pools of human beings to work with. Those who want to stay back need to work and earn their livelihood locally. And there, I think, no better organization than Pradhan to have solutions. I have, of course, been quite, going to various Pradhan projects, but as recently as 2 months ago, I was in the Bankura area, and indeed, I've gifted 3 videos to Pradhan on the work done in the Bankura, excellent work done in the Bankura area. I'll request, Arnab and others to circulate it. Raj Shekhar, I had sent the links to him. Also to Deep. The second thing is that the work that Pradhan has done, which Satya and some people in the chat mentioned, of restoring the productive potential of natural resources, is the real answer to both the economic and the ecological crisis that we are facing. And of course, Manrega can be a significant source of funding for that. But my own calculations are that we need something like 2% of India's GDP being deployed to natural resource regeneration every year for the next 10 years. And after that, we will actually have a fairly good economy of rural India, where, as Deep said so nicely, that people don't have to migrate for miserable jobs of 10,000 rupees or less and live undignified lives. They can live happily where they are. But that kind of a public policy decision to deploy that level of resources is something that we need to work on. And I have been very actively reading, writing, arguing about it, and talking to various authorities about how to deploy those resources. The second thing is that those 3 crores out of the 5 crores who want to go back, let them go back with at least 3 things this time. I mean, the choice to go back should be theirs, but if they're going back, let them at least prepare themselves in 3 ways. One is, while they are still in the village, let them upgrade their skills to some extent. Whatever they were doing, can they do it better? Can they be, if they were, for example, doing, say, stitching work, can they learn some additional skills? Whatever, and that may not always be possible while being in the village, but certainly should be possible at the district headquarter level. Second is the fact that we need to help them to get organized and understand the value of being organized, so that when they go to the cities wherever they are, they establish at least organizations at the level of self-help groups. But I would go one step further, and organizations at the level of consumer cooperatives and even trade unions. Because I think the mainstream economy, once that juggernaut starts, it's not going to, out of the goodness of its heart, improve wage rates. Again, the whole dynamic will start, of course, due to some shortage of labor for the conceivably next 1 or 2 years. Wage rates will go up, but they will not go up more than proportionately than costs. So some amount of trade unionism needs to come back into the unorganized sector. And, we need some lessons from the way Pradhan has organized self-help groups and federations and producer cooperatives and FPOs. And the third is, let them go back with a and this can be done literally while they're in the villages, is let them master the digital world. This is a new just like we think of land, water, forests as resources, let me tell you that the digital world is a new commons, and it is still not fully taken. It has not got fully colonized, even though there are big giants like Google and Amazon. But at least there is still some scope for people to improve their life situation by carving for themselves a more more of an asset endowment in the digital space, which means every human being who's going back from the village should learn how to use smartphones, should learn how to use mobile banking, should learn how to use WhatsApp, should learn how to use whatever is can be done. For things like Zoom and all, maybe too advanced, but whatever can be done to live their life taking advantage of the information revolution that has happened in our times. So these two tasks themselves give us a lot of agenda. I'd like to end by saying, and I'm happy to spend time offline later, Naren, that Pradhan and many other organizations, but Pradhan is quite unique in this respect, that you are multi-state, multi-location, and the quality of people in Pradhan who work so close to the ground, is so high compared to a lot of other NGOs, that you could actually create the equivalent of what Mahesh Vyas did. You may have heard of the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy. Now that the government for the last 3-4 years has not been, either sharing data or has been obfuscating data, a lot of the economic world is depending on CMI data for not just sectoral information, but also even things like employment data. So Pradhan can, with some help, can become a kind of a national grid of rural observatories, which are, which are constantly recording and analyzing the situation of the rural people and the changes that are happening. And let there be a central processing unit where all this data is analyzed and fed to both sectoral and to national policy level institutions. And that can be a huge contribution, because one of the problems today is that there are very few people left in the mainstream who have any deep understanding of rural India anymore. There was a time when both our politicians and our IAS officers used to come from the districts and from rural areas. Now that stock has seriously dwindled, and at least in the IAS, the number of years they are now spending in the districts is really reduced compared to the old days. So their in-depth understanding is very little compared to people of 20, 30 years ago. And therefore, Pradhan can fill that gap by providing really authentic on-the-ground information. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
First of all, congratulations on the Foundation Day to all of you. And I don't have much wisdom to share, except that in these very trying times, I got a number of queries as to how the law is being implemented. And I was surprised to see that we were actually not just using the Disaster Management Act of 2005, which has certain provisions that are being implemented, but we were using the Epidemics Act of 1897. And that's, pretty archaic to say the least. But most of the states are actually not very well prepared in terms of the legal framework itself. And therefore, there's a combination of instruments that are being used at the ground level. So all these powers that are being drawn at the moment is from the Disaster Management Act, from the Epidemics Act. And some of these states have come up with these small regulations like Delhi, Telangana, Karnataka. Many of these states have come up with these very quick, almost unprepared in terms of its robustness, regulations under the Epidemics Act. And a lot of questions that are being asked on the ground is how is it being, and of course the criminal procedure code that is being used in terms of public nuisance and gathering and 144 and so on. So I don't know, as a field organization, how much are we aware of these very small provisions, because at the end of the day, the way power is wielded in such trying circumstances can also be misused. And in terms of freedom, in terms of even access, there were very small queries like what happens if a child is infected, what are the rights of the mother? Because as you know, this pandemic is so serious that everybody is isolated. So there were many such questions which are on the ground in terms of personal safety. What are the rights of security of people of course, in an urban context, in residential welfare areas, and so on and so forth. But the short point I wanted to make was whether we are aware of these very small provisions which the government is sort of taking strength from, and whether we are really prepared to even understand what our rights are in terms of these very difficult times. So I think one small message I have is that we need to very quickly have an understanding of some of these provisions that are being used, so that we know at least what our rights are, and we're not really shooting in the dark. So that was my small message. Thank you so much, and congratulations once again.
So Sanjay, just listening to, is it written up somewhere? Like we have manuals on how to wash hands and how to, do many things. So is there something on the legal?
So I have a small write-up. I've just prepared a little legal opinion for UNEP. So I'm going to do some editorial stuff and remove their name, and I can send it across to you if that helps. And you can spread it across the.
Yes, I will circulate it.
That will be absolutely possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've learned a lot in the last 2 hours. And what I'd like to say is very short, that आपके नाम और हमारे नाम में पहला भाग सेम है. आप प्रधान हैं, हम प्रथम हैं, और हमारी भी बहुत सारे common, I think, priorities हैं, close work in the community and so on. We work, as you know, mostly with children, and I'd just like to say this to everybody, that on the children front, anything that we can do to build and layer on your work, we were very happy to do so. हमारे काफ़ी resources मैंने कल या परसों नरेंद्र जी को भेज भी दिया है, and I know from our field level people कि there are blocks in which you have a presence and we have a presence, and we will definitely reach out कि अगर because I think there is a lot we can learn from you, and if there is anything that we can add in terms of the children of the communities that you work with, we would be very happy to help. And the last point I see is a lot of the reflections that we are also doing have many common themes, that if you have existing relationships on the ground, then being able to adapt and be flexible is a lot easier than trying to build new relationships. And I think that relationships of trust, of faith, of feeling that ye rasta hum log ek sath chalenge, that goes a long way in strengthening any response that a group of people may have to a crisis. So again, thank you very much. I look forward to more interactions, and I've learned a lot from all of you.
Some quick points on the big picture, which you started with. What should be the new paradigm for Pradhan? Now, going into decentralized economic cluster, that's the ideal thing, but it should be Gandhiji plus Dr. Abdul Kalam, with agroecology being the base. Regarding funds, my guess is the 15 Finance Commission funds plus MGNREGS should take about 7 lakh crore plus to the villages of India. We need to think in advance on how to use this properly. On the issue of migrants, all of us should revisit the Interstate Migrant Workers Act, which is a kind of, nobody has ever used it. It needs to be modified. It's become very critical in these days of migration. And I personally feel organizations like ours should take up the importance of MGNREGS, which is kind of plateaued. So Government of India cannot be non-serious on that, to revalidate. And I think at this point of time, Government of India may be willing. Then a lesson we learned from Kerala's floods, in spite of huge suffering, people tend to forget the lessons very quickly. So there are a lot of public health related lessons which have been thrown up by this experience. So post-lockdown, how to retain some of those experience, especially civic behavior, which are health related. Like if you don't split, TB can be saved, TB can be controlled in India, which will save thousands of lives. So I think we should stress on that. Then we have also identified, at least in the 10,000 villages, there are a lot of vulnerable people who are not getting their entitlements. Maybe we use this post-COVID opportunity to enable when the district administration is having some sense of gratitude. From the Pradhan, from the Pradhan kind of thing, post-COVID, we should go in for a quick documentation because these kind of challenges will come. This time we were caught unawares. Our experience should be documented. And not just our experience, the whole national experience. And probably we should take the lead, at least the civil society groups, on what went wrong, what went right, and the lessons for the future, because you all want it to be recurring. Then we put public health on the agenda, which has not been the agenda except some health activists. So big NGOs like Pradhan and others should put public health for whatever it is there now. Otherwise, we will go the insurance way. And the last point is a new kind of Gram Panchayat development plan, because the respectability of elected bodies is enhanced. And I was very happy to know the administration, district, block, they are working with local governments, perhaps for the first time in many parts of India. So an SHG Gram Panchayat CSO partnership should emerge, and with 7 lakh crore money coming in, we should get into this, and there could even be some kind of a local public health plan coming out of this. So that brings, these are some of the points I wanted to make.
Okay, any quick questions, sir? I just had one clarification. You said about the Interstate Migrants Act. Surely, a lot of, at least I have not seen it. I don't know how many would have seen it. So what does it basically deal with, and how do we?
No, I remember it from my early reading. It actually calls for documentation. Now we don't have. Even Kerala with 25 lakh migrants was running about to find the data. So interstate migrants are there, their entitlements are written down, their wage conditions, their habits. So all these things which are troubling us. It is an old act during our socialist days, but I think it needs to be revisited, and probably there may be a willingness to look at it if it is brought on the agenda of discussion.